We are going to follow the money.
Everything you need to know can be understood with this simple phrase: follow the money. And believe me, that's what's happening.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Welcome to College Sports Follow the Money, an all-new podcast diving into the critical issues surrounding the big business of college sports. I'm Andrew Monaco, joined by former president of Texas A&M University and former chancellor at the University of Missouri, Dr. Bowen Loftin, and former vice president and general manager of Fox Sports Southwest, Jon Heidtke. From NIL to the transfer portal and opt-outs, to the college football playoff, conference realignment, and more, we tackle the key issues facing college athletics today and into the future.
I need to feel you, Jerry! Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money! Show me the money! You're the loudest black man!
We welcome you inside episode 84, College Sports Follow the Money. Along with Dr. Bowen Loftin, with Jon Heidtke, I'm Andrew Monaco. And on this episode, we're going to talk pensions, we're going to talk extensions, and re-inventions. So glad to be back with you all. Once again, there's been a ton. I feel like I say this, it's broken record time. There's a ton that goes on just since we last met. Some topics stick around, they kind of float. Others float in and out. Jon, I begin with you, and I say this as someone who thought that he canceled versus NBC Sports Network. It's back. So it's something that I didn't cancel. I thought I was making too much money with them. They're back. As is sports on linear and over the air. That's one of the topics. Jon, it's fascinating. Just when you think that we've talked streaming and all this other things in play, here comes USA Sports, and the old NBC Sports Network is back. And I know that, we have some reshaping of networks and what's being sold off to what is Versant now, but it's really interesting what has been happening with now for conferences, for people being able to watch after the YouTube ESPN or YouTube Disney dispute. Fascinating how everything's kind of come in full circle once again.
Wasn't it the great Mark Twain that once said, rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated?
Yes.
The cable bundle is certainly on life support. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But as they're still a significant purveyor of people's engagement and viewership these days. I think the three of us on this podcast, I think we still probably all have some type of linear cable system in my home. And I think the joke I always tell you, they're going to cry. Well, you're the new guy that's going.
He's in the 21st century.
You'll be back to the future with us in no time. But if you look at it, the cable bundle is, again, the numbers are, if you read this, the numbers are slowing down. Will they be to zero? No. Are they going to be 100 million ever again? No, that was in their peak day. But they're somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 to 45 million right now, and things have slowed down. And one of the reasons for that is that in these new carriage agreements, they're now getting the ability to put the streaming services as part of a tier in that process. And if you look at that, they've kind of brought the bundle back. Because now, I was talking to folks at Charter Communication, better known as Spectrum. A lot of our folks probably have Spectrum across the great state of Texas because they're the predominant linear distributor out there. But they now have an offering that you can you're going to still pay your $120 for what you would call your traditional cable bundle. But on top of that, they're going to give you access to $100 worth of these streaming apps. So now you're in their ecosystem. Instead of having to log out to go to Prime or log out to go to Peacock and log back in, and even if I'm doing it as fast as I can, it probably still takes somewhere around 45 seconds to a minute to go through that process. Heaven forbid I've got to retype my password in at that point. Then I would have missed the whole second half of the A&M game if I had to do that. But
that was the wrong half to miss.
That would have been the wrong half to miss. But they're starting to create more things. And even the Charter numbers for this last year, they've slowed down. I talked to the DirecTV guys. Their streaming service saw growth last month. So these guys are starting to kind of figure it out a little bit, and there are people now who are looking around and they're frustrated by having to go back and how do you watch these and log in and out. And people, sports fans particularly, are looking for some type of bundled opportunity. And I'm not saying these guys are going to turn back around and get to 100 million, but I think they've certainly stopped the bleeding for now. And then we're going to see, we still haven't seen numbers on what ESPN said about their direct-to-consumer number. Usually, if they haven't said anything after the first month, that's probably not a good sign. Most of these guys like to tout the fact that they've reached X, Y, and Z numbers. So I think there's some again, the marketplace, irritability factor right now is ability in the sports world is how do you get all these things and be able to kind of watch them in one ecosystem? And I think one of the reasons the ESPN YouTube deal got done over the weekend was the fact that YouTube got the ability to ingest all that ESPN content into the YouTube ecosystem. And one of the battles that was going on behind the scenes was talking about this ingestion concept, not indigestion. We all had that in the first half of the A&M game, but this is called ingestion, and where they want to ingest this content into their platform. So if you have YouTube TV now and you're watching it, and you have their unlimited package, you will have access to the ESPN, Disney, or the ESPN Plus content out there that's all part of their direct-to-consumer offering without having to log in or log out to that particular service. So I think these are all things right now that the industry is looking to try to do to make it a little easier on sports fans' ability, because back in the day, the greatest thing about the remote, you could back and forth, find your favorite channels. You had ability to go to wherever you wanted to watch and find it all. And now they're kind of all spread out over there. So this is, I think, a step toward trying to create a little bit more continuity, for you will, for the sports fans out there. So I think, again, now the reason why ingestion is important too is that why the ESPN was fighting and why the carriers, the programmers are fighting against that is they don't have then direct access to that customer for their data. Right. Sure, they'll be able to get usage data from the partners, but they don't have that direct relationship with said customer. So I think that's an important thing that's going to continue to give YouTube that value in there. They're going to have that direct relationship with that customer, that they're able to monetize that in many other ways that we never see, primarily through selling that data to third-party companies, being able to market to them in a sort of a connected advertising world. All these things you're going to start reading about more over the next several years about how advertising is shifting. But one of the things that's important to that is that data to make that very customizable package to that consumer. So those are all things that are happening right there. And that was, I think, one of the interesting storylines I was following in that negotiation. And I thought they might stay out for a while because they both had significant, reasons to do that versus just a price point, which historically is what those negotiations were all about.
John, did they kind of hear in the last couple of weeks during the dispute about that was a problem with people having to log out, all of that? Did they pivot a little bit in the last couple of weeks, or do you think that was something that was a talking point heading into that separation?
I think it was all tied in together. There's not usually one thing that does this, but I think one of the things that was happening too is historically, anytime you had one of these issues, we probably all lived through it at some point, is that everybody hates the cable operator at the end of the day. It's always the cable operator's fault or the distributor's fault. This one was interesting because I'd seen a couple of surveys and basically 75-80% of the people were saying this was ESPN's fault. So this was one of the first times that really the programmer was kind of taken to task on that process. And I think that maybe had a little to do with it at the end of the day. But again, if it had really been working and if people are saying, great, I'm tired of YouTube, I want to just take ESPN directly, there are people that want to do that. But once you do that, you lose access to all that other content. So again, at the end of the day, there's so much value to that bundled concept that makes this thing very important, because you want to be able to have entertainment, sports, news, all kind of at your fingertips. And those are things that, are hard to do today, particularly if you're a sports fan, to be able to kind of have one, there's not one place for one shop, one shopping fits all. So I think these are all directions that the industry is trying to do to eliminate that frustration amongst their consumers, particularly sports fans, because again, the ability to log in and out on a consistent basis.
We'll come back and talk a little more TV a little bit later on in this episode. Dr. Loftin, Mike Elko, head coach, Texas A&M, gets an extension. I want to start with you in how does this process work? Because you have been through this.
Yeah, I'll just remind you, as towards the end of my presidency of Texas A&M, of course, Coach Kevin Sumlin was our head football coach at the time. And in late 2013, there were a number of rumors floating around about pro teams sniffing around Kevin Sumlin. So I was summoned to the board, at least one member of the board who spoke for them all, I think, who said to me, we've got to fix this. We can't afford to lose Sumlin. Now, we all know the history, so I won't say much more than that. We all but he was worried about that. So I was ordered by the board to give him a contract extension and pay raise, not because he asked for it, not because he deserved it, but because they were worried that he might be going someplace else. And it was just based on rumors, nothing really tangible. The Elko thing spells the same story, doesn't it? Because there was talk, and once again, you argue how deeply that talk went, but there was talk of some of the vacancies right now looking at him as a potential person to fill it up. And so the board got excited, as they did back in 2013, and said, we've got to fix this problem. Elko's not come to us with any kind of request. No agents talked to us about anything yet, but we've got to be prepared for the possibility that they will come after him. Therefore, give him an extension of time and a pay raise. And the pay raise was not insignificant. Now, it's a lot of complexity in here. His base pay was around $7 million per year in his old contract, but he had incentivations out there, quite a few of them in there, that gave him the potential of at least a couple million more a year with substantial numbers of wins. This year, for example, had nothing changed, he would certainly be eligible for a number of bonuses tied to the performance of the team over the season, which has been excellent. So that's there. But the board cannot help themselves. And my thought is very simple. It's not their money. It's not their money. They just don't mind, because they have the power. They don't mind using it to be able to do these kinds of things, which in the case of Kevin Sumlin, did it make sense? What happened to him just a short time after I had to give him that extension and a pay raise, okay? He kind of fell off the edge, and all of a sudden he wasn't liked here at all. And that resulted ultimately in his firing, and it cost some money to fire him that wouldn't have been there had the extension not been granted as it was and when it was. So that's just the sort of thing we see here. Now, Mike's going to go to something like $11 million a year on average over the life of the 6-year extension he's enjoying right now. That's puts him in the top 5 coaches nationally in terms of his pay right now. The other thing which I thought was interesting is that the contract extension also included a substantial change of how the pool and how he has the ability to reward his assistants. So that's something which wasn't in the original contract at the level it is right now. I mean, you always get a pool of money for your assistants when you get a job as a head coach. That's a variable. But this one is different. I haven't seen all the details because the university hasn't put them out there yet, but in a very short time, they'll be publicly available to us, and we can see the details very clearly. But what seems to have happened here is a pretty imaginative approach to how we're going to manage the pay of the assistants and so on going forward, which I don't know if Mike asked for that. I can't tell you the answer to that right now. I'll try to find out over time, but it's a good question you might have for him in some interview, Andrew, that if you want to speak about that.
He mentioned it earlier today, is that it was, we talk about alignment an awful lot, and he mentioned it today in his media availability, that was a big thing. But that it wasn't that he went to the table and asked for that. That had been coming along. And this is an administration that is seeing, and to your point, Dr. Loftin, in the past, there was no front office like there is now. You know what I mean? And I think this gives him a little more discretion for, as he was saying, the assistants, support staff, auxiliary staff, to reward them. A lot of times, and John, back me up here, schools will give the head coach a lot of money, but the assistants churn because there's not money for them. You don't have long-term success doing that. The other thing that I'm going to say about this extension, it's a year unlike any other. And we always hear coaches talk about with their players about the noise on the outside. This might be more about the money. And along this lines, you can't have teams recruit against A&M because Elko's not going anywhere. You have that solid part of, hey, we believe in you. This is how we're building. And now Mike going forward says, look, this is how we're doing it. This is how we're going to go forward. Plus to take him off the carousel of, Dr. Loftin, to your point, real or imagined. He's now off the table. So what does that give you, this ability for your old team that, you know what, we're going to take all this out of the way, that he doesn't have to answer that question any longer. That can mean a lot on a season that is turned into be something special. I get everyone wants to focus on the money. I get it. Cost of doing business in this day and age. Fair, unfair, not for me to say. I thought it was a stroke of genius to do it and just take everything out of play. No more. Same thing with Kurt Signetti at Indiana. Guess what? I guess he's not going to Penn State, right? He's going to be at Indiana. And this might be the first domino to fall before we actually get some hirings, is who's going to be safe and secure, which of course leads to more noise of, well, they didn't lock up his guy, so he might be going, I think it's going to be an absolutely fascinating thing, but still very incentive based is also my understanding about this.
Yeah, that hasn't gone away. I mean, clearly the board, going back to the last hire, when Elko came on board here, was very clear. We're not going to get caught quite the way we were with Jimbo Fisher here at Texas A&M. And so I think that was a wise thing. But there's still a lot of money involved here. It is a very high level. It is a guaranteed contract, and it's going to be expensive. And I'll just remind you guys, I don't care how good a coach is today. Inevitably, what seems to happen is they fall on some difficult times later on. And maybe Nick may be the one person who may have not really ever gone that far down after he got to where his last venue was in Alabama. But most coaches, I mean, Kevin was cherished initially here, but his own personal issues came to fore, and issues from that spread into his coaching and his play and his recruiting and everything else. And it ended up being a pretty nasty end. And you saw his demise even after leaving Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to say that given especially the way things happen today with the portal, the ability of big dollars from the private sector to be able to influence team size. Just look at our friend at Texas Tech and what the money has done there. I mean, Texas Tech has come a long ways in a short time, but it's been money infusion that's done that. And I think that to me is something that's it's really prevalent right now. It was not so just a few years ago. And we can't really know from that short track record how this money is going to really affect individual coaching jobs going forward. I pray that Elko will be successful and happy for a very, very long time to come. It makes me a lot less concerned. But I do think that there is this inevitable situation where you look back and say, why did I do that? Why did I do that? And there were many that said that, I think, after Kevin got to the point where he did and he was let go. Just one example. But look at Penn State. I mean, that coach was successful by most measures, guys. Right. And yet he's gone.
Yeah.
Brian Kelly, still successful by some measures, but not a good fit. We understand that. It was a curious hire to begin with, but nonetheless, an expensive decision right there, depending on how the lawsuit comes out anyway.
Yeah, that's true. John, we've talked about this before, that ADs have to be nimble. Would that be the right word in 2025?
Certainly one of them. Yeah. And then you've got to be able to head on a swivel, and you've got to be a diplomat to deal with all of the different influences that are coming in to help determine these types of making these moves right now. Again, I'm sure there were people. I mean, I think, again, the initial contract that was set up for Coach Elko, I think, was very fair in terms that it was incentive laden. You could get to $12-13 million if you're winning a national championship, you're playing at that level. The problem was those old coaches' contracts where you were paying everybody that you were going to hope they got there. And those are the things that really didn't work out, because that's, less than 10% are going to get there at the end of the day. So I think, again, the contractual structure was fair. I think, again, to your point, the pool, the game is changing, the GM, how do you start to, are they more valuable than your coordinators? You could probably argue that they would be at the end of the day, because they're helping you put your roster together. And you can't really coach anybody if you don't have players. So I get it, but this is just the NFL-ification of college football right now.
Exactly.
As you say that, John, earlier today, Coach Elko was asked about roster construction, and he has leaned on NFL people on how to do it. And yet it's different because it's not free agency every year, but there are those similarities. And it would be foolish not to ask, how do you do that? You know what I mean? So Yeah, and with having a GM that Mike gives a lot of credit to for putting this team together and future teams together. You still have to have those layers. You can't go all in this year and have nobody of any experience next year. You know what I mean? So there is that, but no, it's fascinating because building a team is completely different in 2025 than it's been in the past.
Well, I think one thing when they do the look back at the season when it's over, all things happen. I think again they're going to look back and say what Signetti did at Indiana, and he's kind of got 2 years under his belt to show it, and what Coach Elko's done here, I think are going to be ways that more and more teams are going to look at. Again, you look who all your preseason teams were early on in the process. You don't see a lot of those names aren't necessarily there at the top. They're holdovers, but I think again, how do you build that roster? How have you had it done, and how do you build that continuity as a team? Teams don't come back from 30 points down if there's not culture there.
Correct.
All right. So that told you a lot about what was going on at A&M this weekend. I mean, if again this is in a portal world and you have everybody playing for themselves, they're all figuring out what's going on after the game at that point. So that was something that I think that really was a differentiating factor. And I look around the country, you're not going to see a lot of comebacks like that.
No, I agree.
Never have.
Yeah. No. It's something special. And Mike said this on his radio show last week. Don't make me choose between you and culture. He's picking culture. Yeah. That's what he's building. And that's the alignment that we talk about. That's not a 1-year thing either. Dr. Loftin, we've been talking, now we get to the pension portion of this, that when it comes to the California UC Investments, the University of California's pension investment arm, attempting to acquire a 10% stake in the Big Ten. The chief investment officer and the vice president of investments, I found this quote absolutely fascinating. He said, sports is cultural capital. And look, we'll get into all of this in the Big Ten, that not all schools are in on this. And it seemed like it was trying to be rammed through. But before we get to that, cultural capital, we've never thought of sports like that before. And I give them credit for looking at it like that. And I guess some people are pushing back on the private equity part of this, that it's more of an investment than it is private equity, or are we just changing terms here?
No, I think the term you mentioned there, the idea of cultural value here, the value that's in many respects intangible but very visible. You can talk about it like with A&M. I mean, we all saw it. We saw it happen on Saturday, okay? And we all know it came from the locker room at halftime when these guys sat down together and talked. They have said a few things about that since the game ended. So I think there's that. The issue is somebody monetizing that. How do you monetize that? And that's what this is about. This isn't the first episode we've encountered about the idea of private equity intruding into the college sports scene. I think nothing has happened really yet, but there was talk in the Big 12, about them selling rights to naming the conference and things like that. It hadn't happened. It may not happen. So, but this is the first, sort of really well understood deal coming out of this idea of monetizing what college sports has from a private equity standpoint. And we're talking about a fund worth about $100 billion. That's about the value of the UC pension plan. This is University of California's, long-term pension plan to pay all their employees as they retire. And the actual value of that fund's around $100 billion right now. And we're talking about them paying $2.4 billion to the Big Ten. That's a bit over 2% of the value of that fund. So it's not like they're taking a huge shift to be able to take a lot of their money and put it into one place. You're taking 2% of it, okay? So make sure you're in context here with that Andrew. But I think it's an interesting prospect. They're looking at being able to draw from the revenue of the Big Ten on a basis over time, up to 15 years before the rights become renegotiable, basically, for this. But they actually they don't just own the Big Ten, they own a fraction of the media rights of the Big Ten. So they've gone a level below sort of the conference office and things like that. And they're actually looking at where the money is. As John would tell you, Jon Heidtke would say, it's the media, it's the media rights that have the real value here. And so they're taking that and they're saying, we want a piece of that action. And of course, they're looking at returning from their capital investment. They want to get return on that capital investment. It's going to come in the form of checks they're going to get, transfers of money they're going to get probably year by year from the Big Ten based on their revenue. Well, the revenue right now is really pretty good. It's going to get better. As John can tell you, the way the rights are going to go for the Big Ten means right now they're the richest conference in the country, both predicated on the value of media rights they've negotiated, but also how many members they have. And that's going to get even better, at least in terms of the revenue, in a few years. So the UC system is betting not just on the moment, but also what's coming. The reason this is challenging to people is they've seen so many examples of private equity institutions coming along and buying a old traditional company and just simply cashing out, taking that company and cutting it into pieces and going away. And there's this fear, I think, that could happen here. So what will they have? What kind of control or input would they have as an organization, the UC pension system, into even the operations of the Big Ten? I would argue virtually none. They get money. I think the deal is really just about money. I don't think there's any operational control that's provided to the UC pension plan in terms of the Big Ten. And so this is a purely monetary thing. So Petiti is just simply saying, I want cash now. I want to take some of that cash and give it to all the schools in my conference. And in return for that, over the next many years, we're going to write a check every year to this UC pension plan fund to pay them back. I think that's the transaction we're talking about here. I don't think there's control. I don't think there's going to be any tremendously bad consequences to the Big Ten, except you get an infusion of cash today and they won't be there tomorrow. This isn't going to come every year. It's an upfront payment, and schools will spend that money, I think, fairly quickly, and then it's gone. And yet they're going to give up a measurable fraction of their income going forward. But they're saying to themselves, why worry? We're going to get more money in the future from our media rights contract, and therefore we won't even feel this. I'd like to hear John's comment about that particular part of it.
Well, I'm going to jump in here. Why are USC and Michigan balking? Was it too quick for this Big Ten Enterprises?
I think USC is doing it in part because of where they are. I mean, they're a private school. Okay,
right.
Don't get me wrong here. But
well, they kind of forced the Big Ten into. They kind of broke up the Pac-12. You know what I mean? Like that's what. Well,
UCLA and USC together, I think, bear the primary responsibility for the demise of the Pac-12. No doubt about that. But I think part of it is simply where they are. And again, they're responding, I believe, to simply a view that some people have in general of what private equity has meant before. I don't think that's as transmittable to this particular issue as some people might think.
Gotcha.
As far as I can tell, I haven't seen a contract, okay? But what details I've been able to find coming out of this deal do not seem to give any measure of control to the UC pension plan. My God, they aren't buying the entire conference, okay? That's what you see in the past. You see equity firms buying an entire company and then chopping it up and getting rid of it just to make the cash and pay themselves back and make a profit. That's what's happened. Yeah. That really can't happen here. And so I don't see it as a good comparison with other private equity deals we've seen, because it's a very much a fractional type of thing, and there is no real ownership involved here. But I really think about the issue of media rights, and John knows about these things, how they're going to evolve over time, what the value of the Big Ten's media rights will on the next iteration of their negotiations with the carriers that they're going to work with.
So again, I preface this by again, all I've seen is what I've read on this process too. But I think you're right on terms of this isn't what your typical private equity deal looks like. This is going to be something unique because this isn't a company that's a turnaround. This isn't sort of already, it's a franchise, it's an institution. It's kind of like what the NFL's letting in private equity in to do to help these guys pay the bills, get you up to 10%, whatever it is. They've all kind of basically opened the doors for those opportunities. So they're all going to probably have different structures or how that rate of return. But typically a private equity company term is looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of a 18 to 25% return on these types of deals. So you're talking from that standpoint. This particular situation, what you're talking about is as I've read it, they're going to own a percentage of Big Ten enterprises, which is going to be the controlling factor of this. So if you're going to be owning something like that, you will have some seat at the board. You will have some representation there. There will be some, it's not like they're just as a silent partner at the end of the day. So you may not read about them, but they're going to have some influence. It's just going to, again, determine what does that influence look like at the end of the day. Then having said all that, the other thing that I think this is that this is sort of a unique thing. And I think there are some schools like, again, you look at says, why is Ohio State for it and Michigan against it? Michigan is one of these schools, at least from what their people are saying, is that they have the money. They're going to be a have when this is all said and done, no matter what happens. Is why are we rushing into something? And are we leaving even more on the table potentially here? So I think they're saying, let's tap the brakes. Let's take a look at this. Let's see how things play out. And I think they're taking a more cautious approach. Now, you've seen Ohio State, because at one point I saw Ohio State was one of the same schools saying that. They're also going to be a have when this is all said and done. But apparently they're now moving forward. And I think one of the reasons they sort of like this process is that their administration, not before this had started talking, they'd even come out and says, look, guys, we ought to look at uneven revenue distribution as well. Because if we're Ohio State and we're playing at this level, we're going to be in the CFP every year. We're going to deserve a little bit more of the overall pie because we're carrying this network. We're driving viewership. The reason we're getting these media dollars is people want to see us play. And they're right on that. And so I think, again, I was reading somewhere that if this was right, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but if this deal were to go down today as structured, every school would get, I think, somewhere between 130 and 140 million right up front. Ohio State's going to get 190 to 200. Washington and whoever Oregon are going to get less than that. They're going to already start the uneven distribution process there. And if I'm Ohio State and I realize I'm in a pretty good place right now, and the Big Ten's going to be a player, whatever the future looks like, is let's take advantage of this. I'm going to get more money. Now I've got the precedent to get that uneven revenue sharing distribution. So they're probably comfortable with that. Even if you're Washington or Oregon, probably 80 million right now, 100 million, nothing to squawk at. So I do think it's interesting. These media rights go out, or the grant of rights are going to go out to 2046. And I think if I'm part of this this investment firm, is the only way that's going to create more money at some point in time is that if you think the world's going to change to a sort of a super conference world, is this would certainly make me believe is that the Big Ten is going to be the next to strike on expansion. And they're going to try to go pick off the next 4 schools at some point that they think makes sense for this to try to bring them into this fold. Under the auspices of, we got all this money, here's another, we can give you even TV distributions from day one. So you don't talk a lot about that, but if they accept this, I think this gives them a war chest to be out there and be and I would certainly be aggressor in this world. If there are other schools that we want to get and even separate us even further from the SEC, let's go out and get them. And then put the SEC on the defensive. So, again, I think there's some other, we certainly haven't seen those reasons come out at the end of the day, but I do think, again, this is positioning them to make the next preemptive strike in the world of, okay, what is the new future going to look like for college athletics? And I have the best brands. I'm going to drive the best TV ratings, and therefore, ultimately, I'm going to drive the greatest media dollars that are out there. And that translates into sponsorships and other things out of that mix too. So to me, I think it's an interesting play. And I think, again, they're saying, hey, again, there's pros and cons on this. But I think right now the Michigan people are saying, hey, let's take a look at this and see what the future holds. Could there be a better mousetrap out there? But once you get into bed with these guys, don't kid yourself. They're going to have influence.
Any truth to Michigan and USC might look going independent if they're not happy with any of this?
Here's the interesting thing. Okay, think about this. 2033, 2034 it's not that far away. All right. Mm-hmm. If you were, thinking out loud and you're Michigan and you're USC, what's to stop you from going to Texas A&M, Alabama, whoever you think are the best guys out there and saying, what if we did this on our own? All right. And we were there. And again, we're going to be able to, we're going to be the haves. And then you get all the haves together from both conferences and say, let us drive the bus on this going forward. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I would certainly think if I'm in that situation and I'm one of the schools that they're paying the significant amount of money for, no offense to my brethren, Purdue or Vanderbilt in their conferences today, but if I can swap them out for a, fill in the blank, an A&M or Alabama, that's significant to them in this world. So I think that's part of what this process is is structured to do too, is that again, these media rights are going to still be valuable. Content is king, and say, but how do you get the best players from that content, in a particular environment? And who knows if that would happen there too. So those could be some things that are happening there on the backside. And if I'm the Big Ten and I can wrap this up to 46, I'm going to probably look to do all that I can, and again put us in the pole position there. But if I'm Michigan or one of the haves in that market school, hey, tap the brakes. There might even be bigger revenue for us if we look to try to do if there was a different approach to that marketplace.
Dovetailing into the next topic, John, that you shared with us about a new poll coming out. We hear about the Nielsen ratings. Now they're using big data and panel for ratings, that the 5 most watched teams in college football are all SEC schools.
Yeah. And I think that goes to the point that again, it really shows the power that ABC and ESPN have in this marketplace by owning the majority of those rights. Really, the only conference that they don't own technically is the Big Ten. And so how they program it, what they put on there in that 11 window, that 2:30 window, that 6 p.m., 7 p.m. window, they have basically won those, all across the process. The Big Ten wins, when Ohio State plays Michigan, that'll be the winner across all the markets that day. Texas, Ohio State, still the most watched game this season. So, it just kind of shows you the power of what ESPN's done and to program that and dominate that viewership. But they do own 30, they probably own most of the college football viewing hours other there than the Big Ten. But it was interesting to see that Ohio State was only, 5th in that list, and then Michigan was 11th. And I think those were the only two.
Indiana wasn't even in the top 15, John, as you told us, right? The number 2 team in the country.
Yeah, so you've got that. Indiana's not anywhere. A&M and Indiana aren't even in the top 15. They're probably not in the top 20. From that standpoint. Again, this is people watching TV as reported by Nielsen. These are the big brands. We've talked about that sort of cutoff. If you're a network, you want a game that's drawing over 4 million, customers on a game in, game out basis. Those are tier 1 games. And just to show you, Alabama, people watching them this year, they've averaged about 8 million. That's probably going to go up this number because of their game against Oklahoma this past week. Tennessee, 7 million. Georgia, 7 million. Texas, 6.5 million. And then you get their LSU still 6.5 million. People love to watch a train wreck. Oklahoma, surprisingly, up there at 6 million. Ohio State, first Big Ten school at 7 million. And then you get in there, and then it's Florida. Let's quick through here. Florida State, your first ACC team at 9. A brand. People still follow Florida State. They're in the news. People still watch, just under 5. Ole Miss at 10. And then Notre Dame shows up at 11. And then Michigan at 12. South Carolina, of all things, they probably at least watching the first half. They were at 4 million. Miami, 4 million, ACC, and then Penn State almost at 4 million. So it's interesting to see, but that goes back to our point. That's an empirical data on these brands are still that people want to watch. You put them on, people will tune in. And again, here we are at A&M, and Indiana, 2 and 3 in the process, probably not even, not in the top 20 at this point. So again, it just shows you how the TV world looks in terms of, again, if you have that brand, and again, think about Michigan, think about Ohio State, think about the schools on that list, they probably have the ability to say, hey, wait a minute, time out. People are tuning in to watch us, not the conference that I'm in. If I were able to get the right schools into this mix, what does that mean to me at the end of the day? So I think that's part of the reason why they may be pressing pause on that or wanting to slow the process down, because once they commit to that, they really don't have anything else to do for the next 20 years.
Dr. Loftin, you had shared with us that we talk about TV, those eyeballs, and the fear could be pricing fans out of stadiums if you make it that easy. Now, look, I'm doing what baseball did years ago. We can't televise our home games. That'll keep people away. It's the old argument, but there is a real fear of pricing fans out, which is something, Dr. Loftin, that we could be talking about for a while, because it doesn't look like prices are going to be going down. I'm not even going to say anytime soon.
Well, my costs are going up. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
As you probably know, my wife and I subscribe. We have season tickets to almost every sport at our local university here. So we spend a lot of time together. That's our real together time, is sitting next to each other at a football game or a basketball game or a soccer game or a volleyball game or whatever it might be. Baseball's coming up. So again, that is the reality. Matt Baker is a writer who put out an article just a few days ago in The Athletic, which I found compelling. His focus was on Florida State, but the actual lessons learned here are quite widespread. He interviewed a lot of people who are old-time fans but aren't wealthy, and they have had to degrade year by year their investment in being able to watch their favorite team play ball. And it's not just the price of the tickets, guys. They talk specifically about what it costs they don't live in the location where Florida State is. They got to travel there and they got to stay in a hotel there. And therein lies a tremendous cost that isn't always talked about. All the hotels in places like College Station, Texas, and Bryan, Texas, where we live, places like Tallahassee, smaller towns especially that have a exciting, interesting sports, mecca built around a university. You're talking about 2 or 3 nights you've got to buy to be able to have the hotel room at all, and talking about a cost which is 3 times their rack rate. That's what's common right now. So even to stay in a very modest hotel, they're talking $1,000 just to go to the town. They try to find places to eat like McDonald's before they go to the game, because the price inside the stadium is 6 to 10 times more it would be at a McDonald's for almost the same food, and they just can't afford it. They'd love to be able to afford it, they just can't afford it. So I think that's a reality. And you see schools like Florida State not building more seats. They're doing quite the opposite. They are downsizing their stadium, replacing seats that were accessible to the ordinary folks with premium seats that cost a lot more and have amenities and things like that with them. Fine. I enjoy amenities, and I can usually afford more than some. But my point is that this is reality for so many fans today. And how will that play out? John and I have talked so many times on this show about the issue of butts in the seats. It's a lot easier to stay home with my 90-inch OLED TV, curved screen, my woofer, and my comfortable chair and my beer in my hand, which I only paid $1 for at the store, not $15-20 for it at the concession stand. That's easier. No traffic to fight, no parking issues, no long lines to wait to get out of the parking garage. All that's gone if I stay home. And the experience is darn good, guys. It's darn good to sit there with a big screen TV and a woofer and a few talking heads to entertain you along the way. That's a good life. So what is the value? When I was in the SEC, back in the day, either Texas A&M or Missouri, our board meetings oftentimes turn to the issue of the fan experience and saying, what can we do? What can we do to enhance the fan experience so it's worth it to someone to fight the fight of getting there and getting back home again, and all the unpleasantness of bad weather and you name it, heat, cold, both can be part of the equation during a season. Why do I want to do that? What is good about this? Just to give you a marker here, I was talking to a young lady just this weekend. She was here to get an award. She's one of the 12 under 12. If you know what that means at Texas A&M. She's a recent alumni, graduated in the last 12 years from Texas A&M, and she's not come back very often. But she was back here this weekend. You know, her comment was, "We've got Wi-Fi in the stadium." That was her comment to me. She was stunned by that, because back in her day as a student here, it was pretty skimpy, folks. But one of the things that was done when Kyle was redeveloped was to really enhance the Wi-Fi coverage there, with the hope that there'll be something you can do with Wi-Fi and your phone in that venue that you could not do at home. And therein lies the secret, I think. We have to figure this out. The NFL's worked hard to downsize stadiums, to get parking and traffic patterns developed very, very well. And they're usually in big cities, which have the infrastructure, not in smaller towns like College Station, Texas. And so that's sort of thing that you want to think about. I think we have to look at the issue of how this goes forward in real time. The butts in the seat are going to still be valuable, but how many butts can you get? 105,000 is Texas A&M. I was in Missouri last weekend, guys. Weekend before last now.
Yeah.
And that stadium seats 62, 63, something like that. Construction made it awfully difficult for people to get around. Luckily, I had a friend who got me there and got me out of there. But I mean, it's just not an easy situation. But we have the size of Texas A&M to be able to handle that. But how many schools will have that size? Again, Florida State's deliberately downsized their stadium just to be able to increase revenue there, not by numbers of butts, but by the value of those butts.
Yeah. John, I thought Dr. Loftin makes a great point. I don't think it is exclusive to just college, right? This is for all leagues, is it not?
No, and again, I think there's a little difference between, I think, the professional leagues and some of your college markets. Okay, it's one thing if you're in the Dallas DFW area trying to factor for all the different things that are going on in Dallas. And if you're looking at your arenas, your stadiums, et cetera, you're trying to maximize the revenue per seat that you're doing in there. And so they still have seats for you can go by in the outfield and sit out there and pay $20 and get into the game. But where the revenue comes in, those seats are the least valuable. Obviously they're priced accordingly. But your value is, and said, how do you create more of that higher dollar value with the suites behind home plate, the load sections, all those things to maximize your revenue. That's why you see all these guys want to build new stadiums, because it's tied into revenue. They're going to generate more revenue coming in, even though they've downsized it, because they've been able to find the price points to make that work. All right. At the collegiate level, one of the things here, it was interesting that Dr. Loftin talked about that. There's still something that's said to be coming back to, Aggie Land, Tuscaloosa, what's Knoxville, these other markets where they've got 100,000 seats, Norman, those types of things there, because that's an opportunity to get together with your fellow classmates, other things there, shared community, getting back to campus. There's a lot of things that are related to that. In the pro game, it's a transaction. I mean, you're getting in, you're getting out. How does that all work? So I think college is a little bit different. But even at the pro level, even this is 10 years ago, and we would sit down and meet with the teams. The number one thing they were worried about is our TV experience is so good. How are we going to stop them, or be able to capitalize on those fans and price it accordingly? And I think now in the new NBA deal, you even talked about Adam Silver talking about we're a highlight driven league to the end of the degree. That doesn't necessarily necessitate itself for fans to go to the game. So even at American Airlines Center back in the day, they had that unbelievable string of 700 and something sellouts. It was. But that was the upper deck. Those seats you could buy one a day of the game for $5. And it was almost like a live studio audience up there, because people wanted to come in. You could put them up there. They created the environment. But it's going to be, again, there will always be plenty of seats for the wealthy to entertain that process, the affluent, from that standpoint. But again, the rank and file fans that built these leagues back in the day, they'll still want to find a place for them, but they're going to be fewer and far between at the end of the day. And I think, again, every team and every league is going to try to find some area where they can at least say, we can still get you into the game for under $100, but this is where your seats are going to be. 10 years ago, you had them here. Unfortunately, that ain't going to work anymore. We can still get you in now. Will that work? Will it won't work? But again, I still think, traffic, ingress, egress, all those things matter at the end of the day. But I do think the college game, and particularly in college towns, is a little bit a different story, because everybody wants to come in for that one game. Baseball, maybe a little bit more work, basketball, a little bit more work, but football is still something that I think, again, that you will see people want to come back for, to be part of that process. But it's still an issue. And again, I think, if the 70-inch screen and Dr. Loftin said that's tough to beat. You can sit there and watch the game and be exposed in that environment. Again, hard to beat. So what do you do differently? And I think, again, A&M and some of the college towns are able to kind of rally people around reunions and whatnot to get everybody tailgating, et cetera. That all becomes a big part and parcel of that overall game day experience.
But John, getting back to what you said originally, you still want to get all that data, whether they're coming into your stadium or whether they're watching on their screen, correct? Yeah.
No, it was interesting. The Aggies didn't even show up on that list, okay? Again, because you have 100,000 people there, is that taking away eyeballs from you? Possibly, at the end of the day. I mean, if you look at it from that standpoint. So not that that's the issue you should be worried about, but again, if you can get that data, how to better utilize that data, customize that experience, you're going to get more people to watch, or you're going to be able to find ways to get them in the arena. Hey, we've got tickets that came available. Find out for that poor fan who out there, how do you reach out to them, make them feel good, and turn that into a feel-good story versus a negative story, right? And again, that becomes part of your marketing. Hey, identify those people. We've got 2 seats on the, there are things that you can do to market that, but the more data you have, the better targeted you can be to really tell that story and get it in front of the right people who are going to become ambassadors for you too.
Right. Even in 2025, a good experience is so much better than a bad experience, right?
Yeah.
Because that negative
Amen.
snowballs, doesn't it?
Yeah. And now with social media days, that stuff can go like wildfire.
Yeah.
Good or bad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, great to be back with you. Always fun. I can't wait for the next episode because the follow the money world in college sports, it's going to be something before we get together again. That's
We could do one every day, I think.
I think we could for sure. Wonderful being with you both. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Nick Savage is our producer. Nick, thank you. John, thank you. Dr. Loftin, thank you. I'm Andrew Monaco. We thank you for joining us on this edition of College Sports Follow the Money. So long, everybody.